Just a cheeky little video for everyone today. Did you know that the average investor fails to match the return of the overall market? For the 20 years ending December 31st, 2019, the S&P 500 index averaged 6% a year. But the average fund investor earned a market return of only 4.25%. I mean, let's just think about that for a second. In a world where we have index funds that can track the market with almost identical accuracy, why are most investors failing to capture that value? Why does being an average investor mean less than average returns?
There is merit to mediocrity. It is nice to be normal, and average is awesome.
Traditional finance theory always thought people were rational, that we went about our days acting in our own best interests, making decisions based on calculations and considerations on the information that is in front of us. Really?
I'm okay.
Rational choice theory dates back hundreds of years and was first put forward by Adam Smith, the economist famous for his invisible hand. I first heard about invisible hand theory in primary school when my mate Ben told me about this techers he had for sitting on his right hand until it went numb. Interesting theory with some novel applications, but it turns out Adam Smith was on a bit of a different vibe. Adam Smith and his invisible hand thought that if people in the markets were left to their own devices, the overall effect on society would be positive. Kind of like Ben's desire to be left alone as well, I guess. Rational actor theory works on paper, in a world where everyone is an emotionless cyborg only making decisions based on careful consideration and sound logic. But I mean, let's face it, if you've been in a bar in this country past 11 PM, you know the majority of the population, myself included, have a tendency to be irrational at times. And left to our own devices, we will happily engage in self-destructive habits.
Oh! Goddamn.
The understanding that humans are not logically driven, goal-orientated, we calculate everything we do because we're efficiency machines, led to the realisation that we are in fact self-destructive, emotionally fueled primates throwing cash at the wall and sitting on our own right hands for a good time because we all love dopamine. That all might sound like common sense, but it wasn't until the 1960s with the emergence of cognitive psychology that traditional models of rational behaviour were shattered in the face of evidence put forward by people like Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. Their names might be hard to say, but the concept was simple. Essentially, when it comes to decision making, if there's an element of risk involved, logic can kind of go out the window. Or in another way to say that, when it comes to betting money on stuff, our emotions can make us go all kinds of wacky. This very idea has then formed the backbone of what we know today as behavioural economics. Dan and Amos would go on to win Nobel Prizes. In fact, I found 5 examples of Nobel Prizes awarded in the field of behavioural economics. A Nobel Prize and £1 million in cash for basically saying that people are melts when it comes to money. I mean, we should probably take something from that. If the application of modern psychology into economics won one of the most prestigious prizes on the planet, it just shows how hard it can be for us as humans to master our own emotions. But even more, just how hard it is to recognise they are a factor in the first place. Nothing and no one will ever cost you more money than yourself when it comes to investing. So in today's video, let's explore some of these more prevalent cognitive mistakes that people make. So the next time you're about to make a clanger, this video can virtually remind you, kind of like a slap round the face from a freshly numbed right hand. Let's start at the start.
The first rule in investment is don't lose. And the second rule in investment is don't forget the first rule, and that's all the rules there are.
That's a much younger Warren Buffett laying down his rules decades before Fight Club made the 2-rule system an infamous thing.
First rule of Fight Club is...
Taken out of context, Warren's words there could be really disheartening because losses, especially on paper ones, when it comes to investing, are kind of part of the process. I actually think that beginners kind of need to take heed of Warren's words there. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias, or basically a feature of our minds that we tend to overestimate how good we are at something when we first start it, and then underestimate how good we are when we get good at it. Shout out to all my people who are absolutely amazing at their jobs but live in this constant fear that they're just going to get sacked at any moment or found out. Now the key bit is, as beginners, we are firmly here climbing the peak of Mount Stupid. In the current market climate where anyone who has bought basically anything in the last 2 years has done okay, it can be really easy to think you know what you are doing. The danger here is if and when, and emphasis on the when, you do get a reality check. If it's a big one, you may not ever get out of the valley of despair.
Down $32,000, $35,000, oh my god, this is terrible.
The concern here is if in the context of money and investing you wipe yourself out and it's a big one, you might not ever get back up and invest again. You might think investing isn't for me anymore. Warren's #1 rule is...
don't lose.
You've got to be careful.
it's obviously a lot more difficult than that.
I would say when you're first starting out, just limit the amount of money you could potentially lose, because the last thing that you need is to be put off investing forever in the face of all the evidence we have that long-term investing is great for people. I wonder how many people who bought GameStop got burnt and now think investing is not for them.
Worst case scenario. Wow.
It's my opinion, and that is all this is, an opinion. I'm not a financial advisor, as you probably know by now, but I think that everyone should probably start with a broad market index fund and invest in that for a couple of years before they do any other type of investing. That way you kind of get used to the ups and downs of the markets before you go all in on something risky. Take the cable car up Mount Stupid, don't try and free solo the side of it straight away. Honestly, watching that man climb that mountain in free solo without any ropes or anything had me absolutely gripping the sofa. Well, gripping it with my non-numb left hand. Okay, I'll stop making these jokes about the right hand now. Leading off the Dunning-Kruger effect, the second trait that is also a common characteristic is the notion that this is somehow different. Not learning lessons from events of the past and kind of not trusting the data or the science that's laid out in front of you. This works both ways as well, both with the ups and the downs. The amount of people I get in my comments saying 9% average return on the stock market over 100 years is rubbish when you can get that in a day on crypto is kind of alarming. I am a crypto investor, so I don't hate cryptocurrency at all. And I do know that you can achieve those returns, but they're not normal and they will not persist forever. In the same vein, every time the stock market has a melt, I get messages from people saying, this is it, the crash. It's about to happen, and due to stimulus and inflation and interest rates and Elon Musk, the markets will never recover again. I'm about to lose all my money, time to sell. We may all laugh at that while we're sat here now, but data shows that people buy when prices are rising and sell when they are falling. Bloomberg recently reported on an MIT study that found that the most likely age group to dump during a crash are males over the age of 45 who describe themselves as having a lot of market experience. Now, to be fair to them, those guys over the age of 45 might have one eye on retirement and be a little bit nervous about their portfolio taking a pounding short term. But with more experience, you would expect them to know that drops, corrections, or even crashes in the stock market are a feature, not a bug. The world is a crazy place and technology seems to be changing things at a rapid pace. But that has been the case for a long time now.
Tomorrow's world.
Technological innovation has been a regular occurrence in the last 100 years. I used to record the top 40 on a cassette player off my hi-fi system by holding it with the record button pressed to the speaker so that I didn't have to wait for the song to come on the radio. Now, in my hand, I have every single song that was ever made. Don't tell me the world's changing, it's been doing that since I got here. While a crash might be terrifying, I can almost guarantee that this time won't be different. That the world is not ending, and selling out your investments as the wider market drops in value is likely to be something you regret doing in a few years' time. The reason a lot of us will fail to capture the average return of the market is because we will tinker with our investments too much. Gene Farmer Jr. said, "Your money is like a bar of soap. The more you touch it, the less you'll have." An example of this can be found in JPMorgan's retirement guide, which as always is linked below for you. They found that missing just the 10 best performing days in the stock market between 1999 and 2018 would have cost you 50% of your returns. 7,300 days, and if you missed just 10 of them, you would have halved your returns. And the problem is, the best days tend to come just after the worst. Restraint bias is the overestimation of our own ability to show restraint in the face of temptation. I won't FOMO and YOLO into that meme stock because it's rising 300% a day. I won't panic and sell out of all my investments when the markets take a dip. And I won't get too drunk, I'll just have one drink and leave. Yeah, right. When the markets are flying or dying, it can be really tempting to act, and any sensible logic that we do have tends to just go out the window. Learn to mitigate that if you can. When the market takes a real tumble, if you can't handle it, then just don't look at it. Disconnect from the sources of information that are triggering that response in you. There's loads of other ways that our brains trick us into being bad investors. Confirmation bias is the very natural human tendency of seeking out information that confirms our own beliefs. This is then made all the more prevalent by sophisticated algorithms on social media platforms that serve us up content that we will click on, which basically means stuff we are interested in and confirms our beliefs. We then end up in these echo chambers of our own opinions where we think that anyone who thinks differently to us is an idiot. Just a few clicks on a video or news articles will have your feed filled with similar relating stories that further confirm the thing that you just saw. Kyrie Irving blamed a YouTube rabbit hole for his belief that the world is flat. So it isn't really a far stretch to think that social media might convince us that something's a good investment, is it? Nikola Motors had a lot of people talking about it online as the next big thing. A lot of people got burnt there. And all of these crypto pump and dumps target social media as a way of raising awareness. Before you make an investment, try to realise that confirmation bias is a very real thing, and the internet kind of feeds into it. Try to actively seek out differing opinions before you make your decision, so at least your opinion is a bit more balanced. I could talk about cognitive biases all day long, because it's my personal belief that the psychology around investing is as important as the actual investments themselves. I'm not saying it's more important. I know that having a full understanding of whatever you're investing in is crucial to success. And I'm not saying that, just being emotionally stable is enough for you to win at investing.
The most important quality for an investment manager.
It's a temperamental quality, not an intellectual quality. You don't need tons of IQ in this business. I mean, you have to have enough IQ to get from here to downtown Omaha. But
the data shows investing long-term in broad index funds is sensible, and it is the emotions that we feel that get in the way of us achieving that sensible return. Below I've linked a Wikipedia page that discusses every single cognitive bias. Now, not all of them apply to investing, such as effort justification or the IKEA effect, which is our tendency to place more value on objects we have partially built ourselves, even if the end result is a cheap piece of tat. Or the hungry judge effect, where a study in Israel found judges would grant parole requests at a rate of 65% at the start of the day, but the rate would fall all the way down to 0 just before a meal. They get hangry and no one gets out of prison. My advice is, if you've got a parole hearing, take a Snickers for the judge. But the Wikipedia page aside, I've also linked a page that lists the 10 that do apply to investing. I couldn't cover them all today, or the video would be hours long. And I wouldn't have had time to make immature right and jokes. Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. In order for you to be the best investor you can be, you need to understand that your own worst enemy is yourself. Recognise your weaknesses and take time to study the cognitive flaws that exist in all of us. Because if you let them, they will cost you more money in the long run than you could ever imagine. Thanks, guys. Oh, hello. You come here often?